Look, I got bored waiting for Silksong, okay? Hollow Knight is already considered a difficult game. The game often punishes overconfident and reckless players with tricky trap placement, difficult to read bosses, and a plethora of stupidly ridiculous enemies. Yes, I am looking at the primal aspect. Despite this difficulty, I honestly didn't struggle that much in my first playthrough of Hollow Knight, except for failed champion, so I decided to go through and make one of the worst decisions of my YouTube content creation life. I decided to try and get one of the hardest achievements in Hollow Knight, and I ended up accidentally getting 4 of them. Let's discuss what my quest was. I wanted to get the least obtained achievement in Hollow Knight, at least according to Steam, which was an achievement innocently titled Steel Heart. Steel Heart is an objectively difficult achievement. It is obtained by beating Hollow Knight in Steel Soul mode, a hardcore mode that wipes your save upon death. However, you can't just beat Steel Soul mode. No. You have to go even further beyond! To get the Steel Heart achievement, you must beat Steel Soul mode with 100% completion, meaning you have to do everything in the game before the final boss. This means I have to complete nearly the entire game of Hollow Knight, beating tons of bosses, fighting nasty enemies, and collecting tons of collectibles without dying once, in a game that is trial and error. But I've already rambled on for long enough, so let's get into the run with day 1. I start my journey like anyone starting a new Hollow Knight playthrough does, by falling into King's Pass and running around trying to complete the tutorial. I make sure to grab the hidden charm Fury of the Fallen, and this is a good point to mention that I won't be mentioning every single charm that I grab. There's a lot of them, and most of them I will never use in any situation other than a collectible to add an extra 1% to the counter. So I'm only going to mention ones that I either use or I feel like are very useful. Anyways, after this, I beeline to make it to the False Knight boss battle, which is objectively the easiest of the early boss fights, yes, including Gruzmother. And of course, I easily rock False Knight. I've been running Pantheon at this point, so I knew how to deal with most of the bosses. But I guess at this point I should clarify what actually counts towards 100% completion in Hollow Knight. There's actually a lot of things that count. First of all, both charms and bosses count towards completion, though strangely not all bosses count, only some specific ones. As well, all spells, nail techniques, equipment, mask shards, vessel fragments, Colosseum rounds in both nail and dream nail upgrades, which require collecting pale ore and essence respectively. Some of this stuff is easy, some of this stuff is 40 feet in the opposite direction, down a pit, against a bunch of tiger sharks. It's not great. Anyways, I finish this up and head on over to Green Path, because for some reason I forgot about the Gruzmother. I meet Zote, but since the Vengefly King is not one of the bosses that counts towards the completion, I skip it, because I hate Zote, and I think his death is deserved. I fight Hornet, which is one of my favorite early game bosses in pretty much any video game ever, and I grab the Mothwing Cloak, and I meet 3 gods who want to stop me or something. I don't know, I kind of skipped through the lore for this playthrough. After this, I go and fight the Massive Moss Charger, one of the funniest bosses in the entire game for the sole reason that you can beat it without moving. However, after this, I make sure to grab one of the most important charms in the run, which you can find in the Fungal Waste by talking to Leg Eater. This charm is Fragile Strength. Fragile Strength is a charm that gives you a 50% damage increase while using your nail, with the only downside being that when you die, the charm breaks. But if I die, I lose the entire run. So I don't really see a problem with this. It makes a lot of things very easy, like the Brooding Moloch boss fight that I go and fight directly after this, specifically to get another Mask Shard, which again, all counts towards the counter. I then run all the way back to the Fungal Waste in order to go to the Mantis Village, where I fight the Mantis Lords, which is a fantastic fight. I fight the Mantis Lords specifically to get a charm that I desperately think I'm going to need to beat the game, Mark of Pride, a charm that gives you a 1.5 times nail range, which is very, very good. All it says in my notes here is that I hate Deep Nest and I got the Tram Pass. Okay, well that's fun. Well, I hate Deep Nest, and I got the Tram Pass. After this, I head all the way back up to Dirtmouth, where I can unlock the cave that usually has Gigi, who will use rancid eggs to revive you. However, Gigi is replaced by Steel Soul Jin, which is pretty much one of the most busted things I've seen in a Hollow Knight game. Jin will buy your rancid eggs for you for like 800 geo a pop, which is really good. After this, I go all the way down to the resting grounds and get the dream nail, which is a very important item for completion. After getting the dream nail, I fight Zero, who's a ghost guy and also really cool. The dream nail is very important for runs because for some reason, every single dream nail boss counts towards completion except for the rematches, which doesn't make sense to me. Why does Flukemarm and Vengeful King not count towards completion, but for some reason Gorb does? Oh, speaking of Gorb, I go fight him. He's so easy, guys. Like, Gorb is one of the easiest bosses, whatever. However, now that I'm hanging out in the outside area that I can't remember the name of while reading my script, I decide to do something very risky for a Steel Soul run. I summon the Grimm Troupe. You see, the Steel Heart achievement requires 100% completion of the game, but Hollow Knight actually has 112% built into the game, mostly thanks to the free DLC updates. 5% is locked behind the God Home update, which is not something I'm going to risk during this run, but there's a spicy 7% wiggle room that basically allows me to pick and choose what I want to do for this run. And again, since I had been running boss fights for quite a while, preparing for Pantheon, I felt confident I could do this stuff for the Grimm Troupe update. After unlocking all that, I go all the way back down to the Fungal Waste and fight Elder Hu, easily my second least favorite of the, no, I would say third, never mind, the third least favorite of the Dream Nail bosses. After I make it to the City of Tears, I head on up to the Soul Sanctum and kick Soul Master's butt. Because guess what? It's a really good boss fight and I'm really good at running it. I also decide to fight Soul Tyrant as well, but that's mostly because I need essence. This run requires so much essence, it's insane. However, this is the point in which I decided that after absolutely demolishing Soul Tyrant, I just spent 3 hours sitting in one place playing a video game, so I decided to go up and get some fresh air. Which leads us... For day 2, I decided to prioritize doing things that made me more powerful, such as nail upgrades and hunting for mask shards and vessel fragments. A big part of this challenge is about surviving, and making myself more hardy definitely helps. I started this by making it to the Royal Waterways, where I fight the Goat Dung Defender, who is awesome. I then run over to Crystal Peak, where I can fight the Crystal Guardian. The Crystal Guardian actually doesn't count towards completion, however, his second boss does, which I'll have to come back and fight later. I then go fight No Eyes, another dream boss who's just really annoying and bothersome, and after that I fight the optional Flukemarm, as I mentioned earlier, for an extra charm, because this boss fight is incredibly easy. After this, I decide to complete my trivial experience running around the entire map by going to Ancient Basin, mostly to grab some pale ore and to fight the Broken Vessel, another mandatory boss that unlocks a upgrade for the player. I also fought the Lost Kin because 1, I still need essence, and 2, it's one of my favorite boss fights in the game. I'm going to run Lost Kin. After this, I decide to go all the way in the opposite direction and go to Kingdom's Edge, where I can take on the Colosseum of Fools. The Colosseum is pretty annoying in all things, especially the final one, the Colosseum of Fools. I do the first 2, but I skip out on the final one, again, because it's so much more difficult than everything else in the game. I decided to cap off the day by going up and facing Lurien the Watcher, the first of those 3 gods that I mentioned that are really angry at me for some reason. I suck him out and then decide I want more pale ore, so I go back to Deep Nest and face Nosk, which is one of my least favorite bosses in the game, I'm not going to be completely honest. And while I'm there, I also decided to face Galleon, my favorite warrior dream boss. At this point though, I felt like I had been very accomplished and did everything I wanted to do within day 2. So, I jump into day 3. Day 3 was finally the day I decided to go out and do some of the stuff that I was worried about. Up until this point, I've been playing it super safe and only doing stuff I knew I could handle, or that I was confident I could evade death for at least a little while doing. However, today I was going to do some stuff that I had been saving, mostly because I have 0 confidence in myself. My first order of business was going to fight Umu, the second dreamer. Well, Umu's not the dreamer, Umu's the jellyfish. What's the dreamer's name? Hold on, I got this. Monomon. I fight Umu and absorb the second dreamer. Really cool boss fight in every sense of the word except for actually fun to fight. I then decided to actually start the Grimm side quest, as I need to run all over the place anyways. Believe me, I seem to be going through this really fast. 90% of this footage that I have is just me running from location to location. it's really not that exciting. I get the final nail upgrade and I decide to spare the nailsmith, as again, I need an achievement. I also then finally go up and fight Grimm, you know, the funny Grimm boss, the one that everyone talks about being awful and that you shouldn't fight it in a Steel Soul run. I fought Grimm. I nearly died, but I fought Grimm. Look, I've been running Nightmare King Grimm for ages by this point. I was so cocky, and I nearly paid the price for it. Fun fact, I did eventually pay the price for it. Not in this run. I died to Grimm in a different run. If you thought this was my first attempt at this run, you would be kidding yourself. This was like my 6th attempt. I also go and fight Hera, and by fight, I mean just go find her and eat her. You know, because that's fun. I then run around the map and go to a bunch of those dream trees that allow you to collect a lot of essence. Because again, a major part of this game is collectibles, and essence is by far the most annoying one to get. In order to collect essence, you have to fight a bunch of bosses that are really, really annoying, like Marmu. I hate Marmu. I really, really hate Marmu. I really, 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 really hate Marmu. In fact, Marmu is my second least favorite dream boss fight. Good lord! By this point in the game, I'd already explored the stag stations, so I went and got the last vessel fragment that I'd be getting for this run. I'm not 100% sure if it's the last one in the game, but that sounds right. I then go and decide to fight Hive Knight, not just because I really like this boss fight, and also the boss theme is easily the best one in the entire game, but while he isn't mandatory for completion, the charm that he has is not only really good, but also counts for completion, and I was really struggling to find stuff to do today for the completion that I hadn't already done that also was actually doable. Besides, by this point I realized that I had completely skipped 90% of Kingdom's Edge, so I was making my way back there anyways. For example, I forgot to get the final nail art, which getting it is again a massive buff to my completion. I also forgot to fight Hornet, who I nearly lose to again. I fought like 3 bosses in this day, and I nearly lost against all of them. But this Hornet fight is always one I've struggled with, just because there's so much going on. But I beat Hornet and I get the King's Mark, which doesn't actually do anything since I'm not going for the true ending, but it counts for completion. And with getting the King's Mark, I decided to call it a day, because I knew I was getting really, really close. Day 4 started with a nearly 90% completion, and I knew what needed to be done. I was so close to 100% completion, and I decided to bite the bullet and try and finish my run today. What I didn't realize when I started this day was that my game was currently sitting at around 8.5 hours. While I may not have realized it, this could have been my under 10-hour run, and during Steel Soul, of all things. I started my day by going into the Abyss, my favorite location ever, where I can get Lifeblood Core, but also upgrade my spells and my dash, which again is so much percentage that not doing it doesn't make sense. I then go all the way up to the City of Tears again and fight the Collector, because for some reason he counts towards completion, but none of the other bosses I mentioned earlier. I also go and fight Markoth, who is easily my least favorite warrior dream. I'm not even kidding. The amount of times I've wiped to Markoth during the Pantheon makes me livid. I hate this boss fight. But by fighting Markoth and also going and doing one of those essence tree things, I get the last needed essence and return to the seer and let her pass on, leaving me with 99% completion. All that was left for me to do was to realize that I could go grab one last charm. By visiting Sly after getting all 3 nail arts, you actually get one last charm, Nail Master's Glory, which is enough to give me 100% completion, which means I can now go and fight the Hollow Knight. And guess what? I kick his butt. I kick his butt hard. Because guess what? I had been practicing Pure Vessel. This was a cakewalk compared to that. But with that final blow, the Hollow Knight was slain. And I had done it. I had managed to beat Steel Soul and obtain Steel Heart. And also managed to beat the game in under 10 hours, granting me 4 achievements in one attempt. Steel Soul for beating Steel Soul mode, Speed Completion for beating the game 100% under 20 hours, Speedrun 1 for beating the game in under 10 hours, and Steel Heart for beating Steel Soul 100% completion. This was tough. While I know it seems like I kind of just skimmed through a lot of it for the video, oh my gosh, this run was brutal. There was so much that there was so much that I had to keep track of, and so much that you need to make sure you don't make mistakes on, that honestly this run took a lot of time and energy. And after practicing the Pantheons, I am burnt out of Hollow Knight for the moment. Will I come back to it? Absolutely, but don't expect a video on Hollow Knight for a little bit. At least not until we get At least not until we get Silksong news. At the end of the day, I do really still love Hollow Knight. It's probably one of my favorite games I've played for my channel. I've thoroughly enjoyed almost all the games I've played single player for my channel. The main thing is that I created fictional difficulty by playing Steel Soul mode, and holy cow, there is nothing quite like wiping to a boss fight 7 or 8 hours in. And I did that like 3 times. Steel Soul mode really opened my eyes to how difficult Hollow Knight is for some people. I joke about it, but I really didn't struggle in my first playthrough of Hollow Knight. It was only after I attempted Steel Soul mode that I really began noticing how difficult this game was. Because while I had played confident and gotten lucky more often than not, also skill, whatever, I felt like this challenge really made me stop and realize why I like Hollow Knight. It's a very fun game. A very, very fun game. And while this video is probably not super long, I did want to make a documentation of my experience getting Steel Heart, one of the hardest achievements in Hollow Knight history. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time.